The unexpected. It can arrive at any moment, anywhere. A sudden storm, a tremor in the ground, a fire that races across the landscape. For all of us, these events can be life-altering. But consider this. For the brave men and women who have served our nation, the impact of such disasters can be uniquely challenging, layered with experiences and circumstances that others may not fully grasp. Welcome to the DAV podcast. Today we're focusing on disaster risks relevant to veterans. DAV's Nikki Herman will share key information on understanding these risks and accessing available assistance both through DAV and the VA.
When we talk about disasters, the scope can feel overwhelming. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, identifies no fewer than 18 distinct natural hazards that can impact our nation. Here in the U.S., we have everything from crushing forces of avalanches and coastal floods to the relentless extreme of cold and heat waves. We experience earthquakes and the destructive power of hurricanes, ice storms, landslides, lightning, river floods, strong winds, tornadoes, tsunamis, volcanic activity, wildfires, and the broad reach of winter weather. The list is extensive. And the reality is, where you live dramatically shapes the threats you might encounter. If you call the East or Gulf Coast home, cyclones and floods are a significant concern. In the heartland of the Midwest, tornadoes become a more prominent risk. The West Coast contends with the dual dangers of earthquakes and wildfires. And if you reside in states like Texas, Mississippi, Oklahoma, California, or Florida, you're in what are statistically considered some of the most disaster-prone areas in the entire United States. And just for informational purposes, California has seen the highest number of federal disaster declarations since 2003, a staggering 282, while Delaware has experienced the fewest, with 21 since 1953. For many, it's common to experience several natural disasters during your lifetime. For example, DAV Life member Marilyn Foster has experienced a range of disasters, from hurricanes to ice storms, during her time in the Houston area. She was kind enough to share those experiences with us and how they impacted her personally.
The last hurricane that we were in that was really bad, it was just constant rain. The hurricane was stalling over Houston, so it was constant rain, so it was flooding everything, everywhere. But this time it wasn't the rain, it was the wind. And it was, they were saying in our area, it was probably 55, 60, 70 miles per hour wind. But just to hear it constantly, just not stopping. You literally feel portions of the house shake, and then you have the trees out front that are literally bending, and a lot of people, the trees came up from the woods and down on their property. We had, I don't know what year it was, 2-3 years ago, there was a ice storm here, and we actually lost the entire bottom half of our home. The entire downstairs had to be torn out. Literally everything. Our kitchen completely gutted. Walls gutted out. All of the flooring on the bus gutted out.
Marilyn went on to explain how after that fateful ice storm, they would be displaced from their home for 10 months, and how that fear of losing everything would remain with her during every storm thereafter. The numbers of potential threats can feel daunting. But our goal today isn't to instill fear, it's to equip you with knowledge. Veterans are often the first to volunteer to help after a disaster hits for a multitude of compelling reasons, frequently deeply rooted in their training, experiences, and values. And this made me wonder, what goes on inside a veteran's head during a natural disaster? And is it different than what happens when you're being shot at in war? We put that question to Dr. Patricia Watson, a psychologist for the VA's National Center for PTSD.
I would say yes, because with a natural disaster, both in the positive and negative sense, right? One of the things that I didn't say about response to disasters is that not only do you have the kind of what some people will call negative reactions that I just stated to you, but you also will have some positive reactions after disasters, because people tend to be activated to help others, to serve their community, to do things to make sure things are okay for everyone. It's a shared response to a large scale event, right? you also will see that people feel inspired by the resilience that they see in their community members, right? So after a disaster, for good and bad, it's a group effect, right? So people will tend to come together and try to help each other for the most part. So after a disaster, you don't know who you're going to get. You might have some service-oriented people, and you might have some people that are selfish and not service-oriented. With veterans, the vast majority of the veterans that I know, they went into this in order to serve, right? So when you've been shot at and you're dealing with the after effects of that, you're surrounded by other people who are service oriented. So you have the potential for more support in many ways and more long lasting support in many ways because they have a lot of empathy for each other and they'll stick with you to the many of them are very loyal. They'll stick with you and they'll so I think there is a difference. The act of being shot at also has different ramifications for people. So it might be more intense in terms of PTSD than a disaster because it's happening to you by someone else. But you also have some positive things around you that will offset that.
DAV member and former Marine Jonathan Martin was part of the relief efforts after a recent California wildfire. He explains the range of emotions he encounters from veterans.
Yeah, that was interesting. You had emotions from where they didn't seem impacted on a mental health scale, which I don't know if they were like in shock or whatnot, whereas other ones were just crying and couldn't get over the fact they lost everything. So an example, like a veteran would come in and he's looking around and like, hey, can I help you? Oh yeah, I lost my house, I lost everything. All right, well, hey, we can give you financial relief. Oh, I don't need it. Other veterans need it more. I'm like, dude, what? You just lost everything. So, and then that was kind of weird for me, but I was like, okay, like, thank you. And if you need help, we're here. And then others were like, yeah, I lost everything and, I can never get it back. For the most part, they just wanted their military awards and paperwork. They didn't care about the financial aspect of it, which was weird. So, yeah, it was a lot of different emotions, but ultimately it was a good experience though.
Dr. Sarah Newman, inpatient mental health programmer manager for the Lexington, Kentucky VA healthcare system, has seen this in action recently. Twice in less than 2 months, the Ohio River spilled out of its banks and covered homes, businesses, and roads in her state.
In particular, in Kentucky, we are a very hilly state. And what that brings is we are at an increased risk of flooding. That is a huge issue in Kentucky. And so a lot of disaster relief efforts, especially here recently within the past couple months, have been focused on flood relief efforts. And what we see with veterans in the state of Kentucky is a strong desire to go out and help. And that's because a lot of veterans have been in really tough situations before, especially on deployments. So they are very comfortable going in and helping, getting in the middle of a crisis. So really there, we're not seeing so much of the PTSD type symptoms. What we're seeing is more of the aftermath when they're done helping. We're seeing a triggering of the PTSD symptoms similar to the type of symptoms they had when they went through combat trauma. The beauty of that is we have community-based outpatient clinics that they can turn to, especially in these rural areas where a lot of flooding is happening. So veterans get quick access to the VA, in particular, Hazard, Kentucky. That's one area. We have a community clinic right there. While they're reaching out and helping, if they get triggered and get a resurfacing of their symptoms, they are able to get the help they need quickly. And the beauty of that too is we have some veterans that have not been able to work through their trauma fully. It takes a long time to work through it. And in a sense, going through some of these relief efforts, it gives them an opportunity to go back, see a therapist, and maybe continue working on that process.
Of course, your first step in natural disaster planning is DAV. Last year, DAV came through for over 2,000 veterans who were slammed by all sorts of natural disasters. We're talking hurricanes, those crazy twisters, floods that swallowed everything, and raging fires across 24 states. In 2024, DAV dropped almost $1.5 million to help our members out. Matt John, DAV's Assistant National Service Director, manages DAV's Emergency Assistance Program, and he explains what DAV's offers during disasters.
Depending on what type of disaster, because we provide two different. We have isolated disasters and large scale. Isolated when it's just confined to like one individual's home, whether it's like a fire, lightning strike, a tree falls during a bad windstorm. Those individuals are also entitled to disaster relief. So what we offer is $500 to help with food or clothing during the disaster if they lost any of that, or up to $1,000 if they require lodging. And then we typically, during the large scale ones, we also send out a bunch of different supply kits that have hygiene kits, blankets in them, to provide those who are displaced either at some sort of shelter that is put up by the state or just in a hotel and need like some additional supplies.
The kits Matt mentioned are backpacks loaded with blankets and other items. Think about it. When everything's going sideways, having a warm blanket and the basics like a toothbrush and toothpaste, a razor and some cream, hand sanitizer to keep the crud away, and shampoo and soap to feel human again, that's a huge deal. It's like a little boost of safety, some real relief when things are chaotic, and a way for people to handle things a bit better when they're stuck in a bad spot after a storm or had to bail out fast. But how does DAV separate those who need help from those who are trying to game the situation? Matt explains more.
So anytime there's a large scale that's been identified, either as a federal or state event, what happens is we coordinate with our National Service Office. They coordinate with different VA facilities, clinics to get an idea of how large the population is for veterans living in those areas to kind of anticipate what we're looking at for potential individuals in need. There is specific requirements for who we provide checks to. It's someone who has to have sustained a loss. They have to be a veteran or a surviving spouse of that veteran in receipt of DIC, or the veteran passed away due to that event. They would be entitled to a disaster relief check and supply kit at that time.
Matt is talking about two kinds of losses. One is an isolated disaster. This is when something unfortunate happens just like your home, and it's not connected to a larger event like an earthquake or hurricane. For instance, if lightning strikes your house and causes a fire that destroys everything, that's an isolated disaster. It only affects your property and isn't part of a bigger disaster. So you might need immediate financial help. A large-scale disaster is a really serious and destructive event that affects a whole town, city, or even a state. When something like this happens, the governor of that state declares a state of emergency to help deal with it. If the disaster is so big that the state, tribal, and local governments can't handle it on their own, the president can declare a major disaster. This opens up more resources to help. We'll think about helping with all kinds of disasters, even if the president hasn't declared a major disaster. Examples of large-scale disasters include things like earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, and big wildfires that damage homes around them. To get a check for either a small, isolated disaster or a big, widespread one, you need to meet these rules. You must be a veteran who is sick or injured, the spouse of a sick or injured veteran and living in the same home, a surviving spouse who gets dependency and indemnity compensation, more commonly referred to DIC, a surviving spouse of someone who used to be a prisoner of war, a surviving spouse of a sick or injured veteran who died because of a recent disaster. Also, your main home must have been damaged by either a small or large disaster. Only one check is given to each household, no matter how many veterans live there. You can't have received a check from DAV within the last 3 full calendar years. Oh, and also, you don't have to be a DAV member or getting disability pay to qualify for this assistance. There are some situations where a disaster relief check wouldn't be the right kind of help. For example, damage only to things like a shed in the backyard, a deck, or a car doesn't count. Losing food because the power went out for a while isn't usually covered. This program is for losses caused by the actual disaster. However, if a power outage during an extreme weather forces you to leave your home, it might be considered. Food banks can also usually help with spoiled food. Your primary residence means your actual home, not places like homeless shelters or nursing homes. Matt explains how to begin the process if you are in need of DAV's help.
There's no way to specifically apply through this through like online or anything like that. It's just getting in contact with a department, a chapter, or the National Service Office in which a state has identified a large scale disaster taking place that has checks. So the best way to reach out anytime someone is in need is through our NSO locator. It's on our portal. So it's just find an office near me. It'll also have tabs where you can tab through to chapters if there's a local chapter near you, or the National Service Office. I would suggest National Service Office because you're able to submit a direct message that goes onto their dashboard, and then they realize that they have an individual that is stating that they are in need of disaster relief. The most important is just if they are in need, they need to reach out to the National Service Office because they're the ones who request it. They're going to be the ones who are taking part and coordinating with the department and chapters for facilities that they can utilize to set up to give out relief within an area. So it's a big coordination between department, chapters, VA facilities. There's no specific rhyme or reason, but as long as they contact the National Service Office, that's going to be the biggest point, because if we don't know, then they don't know. And our policy is within 2 weeks of the disaster happening. Large scale is a little different because it's more widespread. It may be difficult to get in contact with DAV, but for isolated, we're pretty strict on that 2-week time frame unless they have good cause or a reason why they weren't able to get in contact with DAV timely enough to receive a check and a supply kit.
Matt also said that if the request is for an isolated event, once it's approved, which is usually within a day, a check is overnighted. There could be a big delay if the recipient is using a P.O. box. When I started researching for this podcast, I really wasn't sure if veterans were built for disaster relief or not. Now I'm pretty sure that yes, veterans are made to help. But I did ask Dr. Watson and Dr. Newman if they had any advice for veterans who do decide to venture out into disaster assistance.
Here's what we know. When someone is about to enter a situation where they're going to help in a disaster, one of the things that is important to do is inoculate yourself from stress. It's called stress inoculation, meaning you need to be honest with what you're walking into. So, speaking hypothetically, I am about to go help with flooding relief efforts. There is a good chance I'm going to come across things that are going to be extremely sad. There's a good chance I'm going to come across things that are rewarding. I'm going to help people. And there's a good chance that this is going to be really hard on me. And there's a good chance this may creep up on me down the road. It's important to know these things. It's important for us as mental health providers to educate veterans on this, but it's important for veterans to know this going in and be honest with themselves that, hey, I may need to go back into therapy, or I may need to let my therapist know that I'm already seeing what I'm about to do. We know for a fact if you can prepare yourself, look ahead, that right there is going to help you have a better sense of recovery, or a better recovery from going through the trauma. So just being honest with yourself. We often see people go into helping with thinking like, I'm fine, I got this. I've been through disasters before. This is going to be no big deal for me. When we want people to be realistic, like this could really take a toll on me. So that's really the advice I would give, to just be honest, be ready, accept that you're a human being and it could take a toll on you.
I think that's excellent advice. And what I would just add to it is you're probably not going to take care of yourself. So if you're most people that respond to disasters don't do a good job of self-care because the needs of the people they're serving are so intense. So if you know any other veteran who's doing this work in addition to you, make sure you add them to the list of people to serve. Like buddy up with other veterans, like check in with each other. Kind of get a sense of like, okay, when I'm going into the stress injury zone, when stress is injuring me, what does that look like? What are my red flags? And then maybe be aware of that. But also, check in with other veterans regularly.
Since Jonathan is our field expert on disaster assistance for this podcast, I asked him to share his support system with all of us.
It was my wife and my cats. I have a lot of cats, and I go home, pick them up, hug them like they're my kids. Yeah, strangely enough, that's what the animals is what got me support I need with my mental health, and it continues to this day from work. If I have a rough day at work or a long hours, I'll just come home, pick up my cat, say hello to my wife after. No, I'm just kidding. And then we also were able to talk about the experience with our coworkers. So also like, man, that was rough, dude. And we'll joke about it, but that's the way we let it out. So that support that you can talk like that to your coworkers is definitely a must.
And that brings us to the end of another important conversation here on the DAV podcast. We've heard today how the unexpected can truly challenge our veteran community, and more importantly, how resilient our veterans are in the face of these challenges, often stepping up to help others. Remember, whether it's an isolated incident or a large-scale event, resources are available. If you're a veteran or a surviving spouse of a veteran who has experienced a disaster, don't hesitate to reach out to DAV. You can find your nearest DAV National Service Office by visiting our website, dav.org, and using the Find an Office Near Me locator. They are your first point of contact for emergency assistance. And for our veteran listeners who volunteer in disaster relief, remember the valuable advice from Dr. Watson and Dr. Newman. Practice stress inoculation, be honest about the toll it can take, and buddy up with a fellow veteran for mutual support. And as Jonathan Martin reminds us, sometimes the best support system can be found in the most unexpected places, like a purring cat. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on the DAV podcast.